The perpetual downfall of the first-person shooter is one of gaming's biggest tragedies. At one point in time, you couldn't wiggle your finger without pointing at an FPS. The market wasn't necessarily oversaturated with shooters, but there were definitely a lot of them. Now we're all hard-pressed to see good FPS releases because we really only get 1 or 2 per every few years. I've been gradually drifting further and further away from FPS games lately, but I still find myself feeling the empty void that would normally be filled by them. Today we're going to take a look at 5 PS2 FPS games. Again. Just like the last video, I won't be hitting any easy targets. Call of Duty and Medal of Honor are off limits. Let's get started. Game number 1 is NPPL Championship Paintball 2009, developed by Fun Labs and published by Activision. In my last PS2 FPS games video, I talked about a different paintball game from THQ titled World Championship Paintball, and you can go watch that if you want, but to summarize, it was really bad. It was clunky, boring, and the enemy AI had horrible dead aim. This game, despite sharing some ideas and subject matter, is so much better than the last one. Visually, it isn't great. I know, it's a PS2 game and whatever. The fact is that it's 2009 and there's no excuse for how bad it looks. These players are actual paintball pros, right? And I feel bad for them. The art team did them all dirty. The gameplay here is similar to World Championship Paintball fundamentally. Before each match, you'll set a position and line of fire for your teammates. The difference here is that it actually works as intended. Instead of just a misaligned arrow that tells your teammate where to stand, you select a bunker on the field for your teammate to take position at. From the bunker, you can set the line of sight path for your team AI to focus on. It's a little bit of extra refinement that goes a long way, and planning out the position of your teammates can decisively make the difference between winning and losing. The actual movement and shooting feels so much better. It's not great, there are objectively better games out there, but it isn't bad. And as you win tournaments, you earn money, which you can then use to buy better gear. That in turn means better gameplay as time goes on. The stages are just really mid. They don't look bad, but they don't look good, and they're extremely repetitive. Gee, where have I heard that before? I get it, it's designed to be accurate to real-life professional paintball, but you couldn't have hung more signs, or maybe put a damn crowd around the arena. It's a wasteland out here. This game shares some logic with the last one in that when you get hit, you're switched to playing as the closest living teammate. There's a small grace period during the switch where the enemy will pause for a couple of seconds to let you orient yourself. Before you switch, you'll be given the opportunity to cheat and wipe off your hit. Man, is this a real life problem? The fuck? Are people out here really like wiping their hits playing paint? Is that how low it is out there? This is a great opportunity to segue into my favorite part of this game. The loading screen hints are a lot different than in most other games. In other games, when a loading screen gives you a hint, it's actually something that pertains to a part of the game. Here, the loading screen gives you really interesting bits of information about actual professional paintball. I learned a lot of shit about paintball that I didn't know before this. If you talk after you've been eliminated, your team will get a penalty. There are at least 35 bunkers on a Millennium field. Make sure you store your paintballs at room temperature. Too hot or too cold will make them hard or brittle. And last, but my favorite one, forearm pads not only protect your arms, they also help paintballs bounce off of you. If the ball doesn't break, you aren't out. It's not an exceptional game, but there's fun to be had here, and it's definitely better than the last paintball skin trash I suffered through. Second game today is Delta Force Black Hawk Down. This port of the game specifically was developed by Rebellion, who also developed Call of Duty World at War Final Fronts, so my expectations are high. If you don't know what Black Hawk Down is, here's a quick history lesson. In 1993, the United States was pulled into the Somali Civil War, when local militia groups started hurting and killing UN peacekeepers. They conducted a raid in the capital city of Mogadishu intended to arrest a few specific targets, but resistance from local militias led to what would become an extremely fatal 18-hour firefight. It's a horrible story. I'll spare you the details, but ultimately that is what this game is about, so I had to bring it up. Before this game even starts, it already pisses me off. I can't name my profile ass. Bro, this is a game about war, where people die, and you shoot guns, so why the fuck are you censoring player speech? Well, as it turns out, this game is rated T for teen, which means most of those things you love about violent video games are censored to fuck. How do you turn one of the most brutal battles of the 90s into a T-rated game? Who the fuck was in charge of that decision? Right when you start the game, you sit through a long and boring turret section that amounts to spray the general vicinity of whatever is shooting at you. I hate turret sections. I like turrets that are optional, like stationary ones that you can use to fight off a wave of enemies if you choose to, but forcing a turret section in any game is just a really bad design. It's admission that you didn't have any other ideas for what should be in that section. The emulator broke the shadows in-game, but even if they weren't broken, the game would still look like ass. Do you like looking at an empty desert with repetitive shacks? Then this is like S-tier map design for you. But for literally anybody else that cares about their eyes and doesn't want to get a headache, it really sucks. Seriously, Viet Cong Purple Haze had better visuals than this. The gunplay is bad. It works, but it works so brainlessly that you don't even need to aim at anything. Just spray bullets, and again, anything within your comically large crosshair will just die. This game was widely regarded as great by the public, but honestly, I just don't see it. There were objectively better games to play at the time, and just being based on on something doesn't make it great. If you want to know more about Black Hawk Down, don't play this game. Go read the novel by Mark Bowden or watch the 2001 film, but don't play this game. Game number 3, History Civil War Secret Missions. Oh god damn it. I refuse to believe the shitfest I looked at last time was good enough to justify a sequel. Who done it? Before anything else, I think we should all give a round of applause to the Microsoft Sam impersonator who makes his return to narrate the history portion of the game.
A Union army of 130,000 men crossed the Rappahannock River on April 27, 1863. They advanced upon the Confederates led by Robert E. Lee.
Something really amazing about this, and I mean just remarkable, is how good it is compared to the other one. Visually, it's a lot cleaner and easier to look at, with a little bit more variation in NPC character models. The gunplay also got a massive overhaul. Enemy hit detection is so much better, and I don't feel like I'm just wasting shots trying to hit one dude. When I miss, it actually feels like I missed. For the sake of being a fun game, some things are sped up substantially, like reloading and throwing grenades. I said it before, and I know there were definitely grenades in the Civil War, but this feels like an overabundance. Like, I seriously doubt we were packing dudes with a belt of 10 iron grenades because the weight of something like that is just unfeasible. Maybe it's because my expectations were set low already, but I don't hate this one. It's a pleasant surprise to see so many of my complaints about the first game fixed here. If I would do one thing differently, it would be getting rid of that dumbass aim acceleration. It slows down turning and hurts what otherwise is a pretty okay game. This one was received worse than the other one, and the reason though is pretty sad. How is it that a game that barely works and is ugly as fuck is more well received than a game that is objectively better? Well, from what I can gather, the biggest complaint about it is how short it is. There are 4 Confederate missions and 6 Union missions, all of which can be completed in a grand total of less than an hour. I mean, okay, that is kind of unacceptable. This game launched for $50 on Xbox 360 and PS3, and $40 on PlayStation 2. $40 is a lot of money to spend on a game that you'll only play for an hour or two and then never play again. There isn't even a multiplayer, which is probably the biggest missed opportunity in this whole thing. So the big takeaway here is that it's still crap, but it's better made crap for a shorter period of time, which makes it a better game, kind of? I don't know. Maybe just avoid both of the History Civil War games as if they were Anthrax. Game number 4, Brothers in Arms, Road to Hill 30. This is another sequel, but I have so many complaints here that I don't even know where to begin. Let's start with the fact that just minutes into the previous game, the main character that we play as in this game was obviously killed. Like, he fucking dies, and there's not much room to interpret how it happens. According to this game, though, he doesn't. Apparently getting shot and sucked out of an airplane just isn't enough to kill Baker here. He lands on the ground close to the exact same spot as the last game begins, and we start the game. Sort of. What follows this continuity ditching introduction cutscene is effectively 15 minutes of walking and tutorials, followed by listening to dialogue, followed by firing a couple of shots, followed by 15 more minutes of walking and dialogue. Just like the last game, I didn't play beyond the first mission. Except this time, I stopped playing because this game has a very boring opening. You start off in this high-energy trench sequence with dudes yelling and Baker narrating, but after like 2 seconds, you realize that you literally don't even have to do anything. The enemies don't approach you. Your bullets don't hurt them. This entire scene does absolutely nothing for the player. Cut to a flashback where Baker is talking about how he doesn't want to be responsible for all of these soldiers, and then we're in that plane from the other game's opening cutscene, except this time, we are the guy standing in the door. I'm convinced that this whole segment was an excuse to reuse a single line.
We wait for the green light! We wait any longer, there won't be a fucking green light! Stand in!
That's probably a good thing actually, because the rest of the dialogue that I heard in this beginning was really bad. A lot of it is either forced or hilariously melodramatic, and none of it hits me as hard as the emotion that the last game put in. We land on the ground and our equipment is flown away, so we're unarmed initially, for like 1 whole minute. After a short walk, you get a tutorial on how to use guns, and it makes me feel like a moron even looking at it. Then you get your next gun, a Kar 98K. So let's take a look at this gun and make a quick comparison with the weapon between this game and its predecessor. Do you see the problem? Whoever was in charge of balancing took one look at the car and thought, man, that thing needs like 10 billion more notches of weapon sway. This is fucking ridiculous. It makes aiming at targets a really hard endeavor. I already hate aiming with controllers, and this sway combined with that is pretty much a deal breaker for me. If this game still has squad commands, I didn't get their you know, I didn't play long enough to make it to that point. It just wasn't good enough to get there. The opening segment was bad, and by extension, I really don't want to keep playing it. Last game on the list today is Killzone, developed by Guerrilla Games in 2004. The only Killzone title I played prior to this was Liberation for the PSP, and that game is aggressively mid. Right when this game starts, you get a really long pre-rendered FMV where a hybrid of Dr. Evil and Hitler is giving a speech to a huge crowd of soldiers. This here tells us a couple of things. These guys are the Hellgast Army, and they're pretty much super Nazis. There's a wolf and light group of rebels who fight those said super Nazis. Are you expecting more? Too bad, honestly. I just gave you the entire story. Visually speaking, this game looks better than a couple of the other ones I've covered today, but there's this dismal World War I scorched earth gray covering everything, and the color gray gets repetitive really fast. The gameplay is fine, but some things bug the fuck out of me. The game defaults to inverted vertical, which is something that I don't mind when I'm flying a ship or a plane, but are there people out there who actually play like this, tilting the stick up to look down? How is that comfortable? I'm genuinely curious. If you play with inverted aim, then tell me about it in the comments. Anytime you throw a grenade, the camera goes apeshit. It's really hard to effectively throw grenades when the game is physically moving my view away from what I'm trying to aim at. This game also has some of the worst outdated sniper rifle controls. When you're scoped, the scope doesn't just sit in the center of the screen like most normal games do. Instead, it uses the single stick shooter method similar to games like GoldenEye or Perfect Dark, where your crosshair will move around to every corner and edge of the screen before you're able to rotate. When you are rotating, you won't be able to see a damn thing. This game feels really dated because of some of these decisions, which is kind of a shame because I'm sure if you could get beyond that, there's a solid game here. The shooting feels good and responsive. The beginning of the game throws a lot of enemies at you and provides this sense of high frequency action. Assault rifles have these separate firing modes that you don't have to toggle between. Holding R1 will fire normal bullets and pulling R2 will fire whatever secondary is on that gun. I really like this game. I know it isn't a bad game at all. I just really don't like looking at it, and I can't bring myself to adapt to how clunky it is. And that was 5 more PS2 FPS games. I was watching an old AVGN episode the other day, Ghostbusters #1, and a line from that episode really stuck out to me. I'm not trying to figure out how it works, I'm just relaying my personal experience as a gamer. The way I'm looking at these games is the same way I would look at them outside of making a video. I'm very quick to move on when I don't like something, but I'm just as quick to keep trying new things. Sometimes I come upon something that I do want to finish, but if a game ever makes it into one of these compilation sets, then you can almost guarantee I didn't finish it. I don't need to. I've said before that I should know whether or not I want to keep playing a game within the first hour. Telling me something like, but it gets better at the 3-hour mark, or some dumb shit like that doesn't really matter. I don't want to waste my time powering through that boring 3 hours to get to a single good moment, because that means I'll probably waste even more hours getting to another single good moment. It just isn't worth wasting the time for short bursts of gratification. None of the games I played today did a good job pulling me in within that first hour, and the best of the bunch was a fucking paintball simulator. Killzone might be the one game here that warrants a full playthrough, but even that comes with the caveat of adjusting to the clunk. Thankfully, I've powered through pretty much all of the bad games in this category, so it's mostly uphill from here. Thank you, and have a nice day.